one would be the agenda of today. So we kind of like had the icebreaker calling on names. I'm sorry if I pick out on you and your name, because we try to like get to know each other and just create a more comfortable environment. And it's always good to make friends here. And I find it a bit harder to network and meet new people during the lockdown. And I hope everyone will enjoy tonight, and potentially you can make some friends here today as well. So tonight we are going to hear 3 speeches as what we advertise on the Technologies Who Give a Shit, the meetup page. And so we would have Jacob as the first speaker, talking about his career journey and potentially a little bit of what happened in the battery day from yesterday. And I'm really looking forward to it. And then we would have Marija. She's the managing director in a renewable energy firm. And I have heard that she's hiring at the moment, so keep an eye out on the job board later on. And last but not least, we will have Gemma, and she's a sustainability engineer, and she will be potentially talking about clean energy projects. We will find out what she's going to talk about later on. And then if you have any questions, you can hold it, and probably you can message me on Zoom, or message Jeremy on Zoom, or just put the question on Zoom, and we will have a panel discussion and Q&A after all the speakers they speak. And at the end, we will have the job board and feedback session. So if you are looking for jobs or thinking about having a career transition, that's the time you can keep an eye out and network with people. Without further ado, Jeremy, would you like to jump into the next slide? And we'll get the speakers ready to speak, and you can learn more about the clean tech from them. So the first one, we will have Jacob. I'll get Jacob to the stage. Over to you, Jacob.
All right, I am here. Can you hear is my audio okay?
Yeah. Just a bit, Jeremy, have you told everyone we are going to record this section, if everyone is okay about it?
Yep. So the speakers have all consented. If you feel reluctant to, for example, ask a question while it's recorded, feel free to just message me privately and I can ask the question on your behalf so that your voice doesn't get included in the recording. The purpose of the recording is so we can put it on YouTube afterwards for people who weren't able to make it to the event.
All right, the stage is yours, Jacob.
Okay. Well, first of all, wonderful to see a few friendly faces. So thank you, everyone who's come along. I guess I'll get going with it. But yeah, Sandy invited me to come do a talk. Thanks so much for organizing this, putting this together. I am recently, a few months ago, a freshly minted Tesla battery engineer. And I know that maybe that might be a lure for a few of you tonight, so don't worry, I will get into some juicy battery facts, especially after Battery Day. I'll probably be going through my sort of journey into the role first, and I think things will come out along the way, and we'll have quite a lot of time, I think, at the end for questions and all sorts of things. It's quite informal. I've left this speech pretty simple, really. But yeah, hopefully it gives some context as to where I came from and how I started, and how someone like, well, a technologist who gives a shit might be able to transition their career, because it's something that I suppose I did have to do, and it wasn't always easy. So I'll get going. So like, oh, actually, out of interest, does anyone actually own a Tesla? I'd just be interested in knowing.
It's too expensive to afford it. I would like to have one. Would you get a discount working from Tesla?
And unfortunately, I don't get discounts, I'm afraid.
I have a friend who has a Tesla and he's in love.
They're fun cars to be in. Unfortunately, I can't afford one yet, but one day I hope to. With the Battery Day announcements, though, there's a $25,000 one in the works, so fingers crossed, right? It might not be too long. All right, okay, well, I'll get going. So like probably a lot of you guys here, at school I had a passion for the technical side of things, science, physics, chemistry, all that good stuff. When I got to university and I saw the sort of crazy alchemy that went on in industry, the ability to sort of shape reality in the ways that we wanted and saw fit, chemical engineering sort of seemed like a natural fit for me. It was something that I remember feeling blown away by, actually, how I was being trained to wield all these different, this knowledge that humans have put together and make it able to produce exotic and useful things for people. Yeah, it was really interesting to me at the time, and I'd always had a pretty strong desire to work in energy. I'm not quite sure why. I think it's a sort of visceral thing. It's the energy has the power to create. So, and abundant energy is a really exciting thing to me. So that was sort of where I wanted to angle my career. My dream jobs were working in that sort of cutting edge future of energy. Naturally, being a Perth boy, wanting to work in the cutting edge future of energy meant working for Chevron. And that's where the story, I suppose, can get it gets a little bit critical, I suppose, on my end of the incumbent oil and gas industries over in Perth. I was influenced fairly strongly by their presence on campus in my formative years. And I guess as a result, I'm fairly direct about my criticisms today, if you ask me. So I apologize if it offends anyone. My criticisms are not reserved for the people who work in these companies, but rather for the people, a select group of individuals probably closest to the top of the organizations. And not all of them, but there are a few. Regardless, I basically bought the line that if I wanted to cut carbon emissions and work on the future of energy, then I had to work for an oil and gas company. Chevron particularly was my dream job, and it was the old human energy, as they say. It's only really as I've had time to reflect that I've been able to understand a little bit more of how I was influenced by media spin, and how I managed to misconstrue the truth so seriously about climate change and energy. But hopefully, as I go through the story, you'll begin to get an understanding of how that all happened. So hopefully the revelations come out as we go along. So starting off, picture the scene. It's 2013, and Perth has been struck by a double resources crash. The boom is starting to feel like it's over. The iron ore price has bottomed out, and the oil price is falling off the edge of a cliff. As far as graduate programs are concerned, there's silence. There's a bit of blood on the floor. Some people have got their graduate programs cancelled. People are taking jobs in IT, all sorts of other things. That was the year I graduated. So it wasn't an easy time. Seeing the jobs dry up around me, I went to my honours supervisor at the time. I asked if he knew anyone in the industry who might be able to float my resume in front of him. He said he'd pass it along, but he also said and told me that I should consider doing a PhD. Initially, I was young and naive. I said PhDs are for losers and I don't want to do one. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But then he said that the lab he was thinking of was at Cambridge University in the UK. So I quickly changed my mind and thought that might not be a bad idea. So I was flattered mostly that someone thought I could get into the place. And yeah, I didn't have any jobs. I sent off an application. As it turned out, I was a little bit too impatient, I suppose. I did get offered a job the next month working for Alcoa in an alumina refinery south of Perth. Unfortunately, it was too late by that point, though, because I had now this idea in my head, this shiny thing hanging off in the corner of my vision that maybe I could go to Cambridge University and do a PhD there at some time in the future. So yeah, fast forwarding, maybe 9 months, I had a great job working at Alcoa. I was a chemical wizard advising production personnel. I was guiding maintenance activities. I was showing how the process flows influence various things. I knew that because pressure dropped along a pipe, somehow that was really valuable knowledge to some people some days, and they came and asked me questions on all sorts of things. But that's when my funding came through. I ended up receiving a scholarship to go off to the UK, and I couldn't believe my eyes. It was my chance to jump back on the energy bandwagon, actually, as opposed to mining and minerals. So in October 2014, I flew off to England, took up a PhD in gas to liquids fuels technology over at Cambridge University in the UK. At this point in my life, I remember being a little bit having to pinch myself. I couldn't believe my luck, really. I felt excited and honoured to be heading off to Cambridge, and I felt I had a fairly strong obligation to do my best, actually. I don't know where that came from, but it's sort of a duty now that I've been given this chance to actually live up to it. On my scholarship applications, I'd written all about how I wanted to pioneer the future of energy, cut carbon emissions, work on the leading edge, you know, and maybe there was a bit of guilt, but at the time I thought, gee, I've written this all out with my scholarship applications, and I better make sure I sure as hell understand understand energy and climate and how they're interrelated. So I began to look around, I started to learn, and seeing as I was in a place that was very good for learning, it didn't take me long. Within 6 months, I had pretty much sworn off the oil and gas industry. It's not an unusual journey, actually. Aussie energy kid goes over to Cambridge, ends up realizing it's bad, and then swearing off the industry forever. I've seen it with at least one friend, and probably, if I thought about it, quite a few more. It's not an uncommon journey to have. And so what did I do as a result, right? I mean, that had been my whole career, thinking about, you know, going into oil and gas, and I was trained for that, and that's where I wanted to make my impact. And I guess, what do you do in that situation? I like to think that I did what anyone would do, I guess, when they realize and accept that they've been pretty seriously wrong about something for a long time. And I tried to learn everything I could. If I didn't know that, then potentially there's a lot of other things I didn't know about. I became pretty determined to learn about the issue. And I realized there was a hell of a lot out there, really. But I also knew that I needed to make my future out there somewhere, so I needed to figure it out. I was still committed to energy, but fossil fuels were pretty much off the table. Batteries were not even on my radar back then. This is 2015. But I knew I needed to find something that wasn't oil and gas. The problem was, for me, is that I was a chemical engineer, and it meant I probably wasn't going to be the solar or wind guy. You know, that's for mechanical or electrical engineers. I looked around at bioenergy a lot, waste crops, biomass, biofuels, algal biofuels, all sorts of things. But many of them didn't really have, they weren't very promising at the time. At least there weren't many jobs going in the areas. You know, if I wanted to do something, I pretty much had to start a company to do it. And that was about the time when batteries were starting to take off. After I'd been looking at different energy sources for a while. A friend of mine actually told me to get into it, but I didn't know. I thought he was wrong. I didn't understand how a chemical engineer could get a job in the space. And this is where I wanted to open it back up to everyone listening, actually. I mean, can anyone here actually tell me about how a lithium-ion battery works? Does anyone want to venture a guess from the chemical level?
Jeremy might know.
Please.
Magic.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Does anyone else have any attempt at how these reactions work, how electrons go in, how electrons come out? No need to be shy.
Gemma might know as well, if she's here.
No, I don't know. So I'm interested.
Right. Well, I mean, the reason I asked this question is because I was pretty much in the same
area?
position as most of you guys. Sorry, Dean?
Is it something to do with the surface area of a particular molecule and its ability to hold onto an electron and easily let it go again?
Yep. That's getting in the right direction. And that's pretty much all I knew about lithium-ion batteries when I got involved in this space. I really didn't know where to start. I didn't see a path really to me becoming a battery guy. I was looking for examples of chemical engineers that had got jobs in the battery industry, and I couldn't really find anyone. all the jobs out there were being reserved for people with PhDs in battery science and technology. So knowing exactly how much you did, I felt like a bit of an imposter trying to get a first foot in the door. But I kept on trying anyway. I literally picked up a textbook, Lithium-Ion Batteries by Scrisati. It was written in 2015 or something. But a battery textbook, I figured I could read science by that point, so I started reading it. And I also reached out to PhD students in the battery space, just trying to learn everything I could. As I began doing this, and to people who know me, this will be sort of an aha moment as to why maybe I feel certain ways about other views in life. But as I began learning more and more about batteries, I found an interesting thing. And it was pretty much that batteries were voodoo. They weren't a rigorous science. No one really understood why they worked. Sure, they get some high level sort of reasoning, or this sort of does this and this sort of does this. But as to, if you want to try and get a battery scientist to predict what material is going to work for you, you're going to be waiting a long time. No one really understands how these things are related, because there's so many interacting phenomena that go on and make it a very complex thing. So, interestingly enough, that was actually pretty encouraging for me, because if no one knew what they were doing, then there wasn't too much of a high bar for me to climb to get into the space. Sure, it was going to be hard, but I mean, it was hard for everyone, and I wasn't relatively disadvantaged too much. So maybe I didn't have too far to climb to get to the leading edge. I couldn't actually find, I wanted to go do an internship. I wanted to work for a battery startup, try and get some skills. But there weren't any around in Cambridge, which is surprising, actually. But there was one doing flexible batteries, and it wasn't really the thing I was interested in. So couldn't find any battery startups. I joined up with a friend and we decided to start one ourselves. We called it Honest Batteries, and he needed something to distract him from his day job. I needed a way to learn about the battery industry, and we decided to start this company. We wanted to invest the possibility of producing low cost, we didn't have any money, and non-toxic, because we didn't have any safety equipment, battery materials. And we literally started building batteries in my kitchen. I found some papers, we had some ideas to follow. We started looking particularly at sodium-ion water-based batteries. We didn't end up succeeding in building a really high-performance device, but we got a lot further than we thought we would. We stored charge. I mean, it turns out that's not too hard to do, actually. But seeing as it's interesting because we gained a pretty unusual experience because we had nothing, right, compared to what typical battery labs have. We had to build everything from the ground up. We built our own current measuring equipment, our own voltage measuring equipment. We built our own, you call it like cell holders, cell compression, the connections between the electrical terminals. All of that we did ourselves, and it gave us a pretty holistic understanding of how to build a battery from the ground up, which I think you actually don't get if you do a PhD in battery science. But anyway, I mean, that's an aside. After a while, I thought to reach out to the university's mentoring program. So I searched through all the profiles I could find at the university, and I found one guy who had batteries in his bio. His name was Lorenzo, and he was based out in Munich. It's where all the automakers are. So he was there sort of being a liaison. I reached out to Lorenzo. He said I was the first person to ever contact him. And I arranged a meeting with him. So I flew out to Munich. Fortunately, Ryanair, it was pretty cheap. I stayed in Munich for a couple of days and I came to meet him. He was a bit surprised that I did that actually, but you know, got to make a first impression. Fortunately, Lorenzo was a champion. He spent the whole time just basically telling me, even though I thought I was crazy, you know, because I did. I was reading into battery science as a complete novice and thinking people didn't know what they were talking about. I mean, it sounds arrogant. It is probably. But also I felt crazy because it couldn't be the case, but it just seemed to be. And he just gave me confidence in all the things that I'd previously started thinking about the industry. And he said, no, you have absolutely the right skills. You've just got to keep pushing. yeah, so it was really comforting to see that, especially when you're trying to build a sodium-ion water-based battery when everyone else thinks that's a crazy idea. So I followed his advice, basically. I kept going, and after a year, I got a job working for a cathode startup in upstate New York. I took a job there working for this sort of veteran of the old industry of particle manufacturing. His name was Robert Dobbs. He'd come out of the sort of the old industry of the 70s America. You know, this is like Kodak manufacturing. This is IBM, International Business Machines days. All these old factories are dotted around that part of the country, but there's not much happening there now. And this is where he was. And so I went to work for him, and he just taught me all sorts of things about his engineering philosophies and how he went about the job. And I don't know, I just absorbed everything I could. I was fascinated by the way he engineered rather than what he engineered. And I started having conversations with engineering friends, because they did design, they did engineering design as well. And my boss was putting questions to me saying, you got to think about, from a philosophical level, how you're doing your design. I mean, do you start with this bit or that bit? How do you think about these problems? And I wanted to reach out to my friends because I wanted to see how they approach problems. And one of them worked for Tesla. It had been a dream job for a while, actually, Tesla. So I got to try and know people in Tesla over previous years, but nothing had ever come from it. But I started talking with her about these ideas and these concepts and things, how to engineer rather than, you know, what. And probably 6 months later, I got a tap on the shoulder from her saying, hey, we'd like you to come over here. So I went for an interview. And that was literally on March 6th, 2020, about, must have been maybe 5 to 10 days before Trump shut the borders from Europe and the world sort of exploded and went crazy. But I got my interview in just in time. And over the past 6 months, I've been traveling back and forth between the US to try and figure my life out, get visas and everything. But I started with the company remotely, working from Australia, and that's what I'm doing today. Today I'm working on cathode making for lithium-ion batteries with a crack team of Tesla engineers, trying to push forward the future of energy, I guess. And I was blown away when I got the Cambridge opportunity, but I'm double blown away now. Still pinching myself. But I guess now it's on me. Got to make batteries cheaper. If I'm successful, along with the rest of the team, and I guess you guys will probably know about it in a few years. That's where I am now. That concludes the backstory, where I came from, how I sort of got into this stuff. I think there's a bunch more time. So if anyone wants to ask particular questions, if you want to chat about particular things, yeah, I guess now is the time. Thanks again, Sandy.
No worries, Jacob. That would be great if you can make the battery cheaper. This is quite expensive. Like I got it maybe $300, $400, just like this bit, and it only would be enough to charge my computer for a day. So I'm not really happy with the price I pay for this battery. So hopefully one day you can make a battery the size like my phone, and then it would be like costing me $10 to get it. That would be the hope. Yeah, and I have heard that in China, there's a large scale of like investment or development in lithium-ion batteries, and I know quite a few Australian like organizations, especially in the water industry, they've been like trying to source the lithium-ion batteries as a source for their solar panels as well. It'd be great to see the cost will be coming down a little bit. So I'm trying to open to the floor and see if anyone has questions to Jacob. Go for it.
Hello, my name is Jean. So yeah, I've got plenty of questions. There are some questions you can't answer. So there was recently an announcement by Elon Musk that he would get the new batteries like 20% less. So is that on you?
The announcement was from who, sorry?
So Elon Musk came out recently saying that the new battery would be 20% less cost.
Sure. I think the plan he put forward yesterday, or the battery day, was to get 50% less. But yeah, yeah, no, that's something we're working towards.
So where does those kind of cost cut can come from? Because
yeah, sure.
what are the new secrets in the voodoo industry?
The thing is, as far as I understand, battery making was developed on a piece of old equipment that Sony had lying around in the factory for making film. Battery making was never designed to be a large-scale industrial process. It was something they jerry-rigged into doing batteries. Batteries they're not made the right way. That's the simple truth of it. For the majority of the industry, batteries are not made the right way. If you have a sort of particle manufacturing background or any kind of industrial engineering, you start to realize, yeah, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. That's essentially where the cost reductions are coming from.
There's actually an Australian company who's saying they have a much better design and is trying to promote it. So that's good news. My real question, because I think that's a lot more strategic question, is linked to what Sandy was saying. The report is that China is the place where there is most of the lithium. So, I mean, I heard some very complicated explanation, and I'm not a scientist, so why lithium was basically most used because of density of matter and things like that. But what would be other options? And since battery have been jerry-rigged, can we hope that we get some different materials that might actually replace lithium and also with less environmental cost? Because if we are going into a green future, we need something that is sustainable, and it doesn't seem like lithium is the perfect answer.
Yeah, I guess first of all, the question between sodium and lithium, I think the person you asked maybe had a limited view. I mean, they probably would have told you to go to the electron half cell potentials table and say, go to the top. That means that lithium has a 3.07 volts to be reduced. They probably would have said that. What they've not realized, of course, is that that was for water. Lithium-ion batteries have an organic electrolyte. So a lot of those things just completely, they're somewhat irrelevant. And in fact, the old high school chemistry training is that as you go down the periodic table, you get more reactive, actually. So it's counter. Yeah, I don't think that's been fully thought through. I think sodium ion is just fine.
So do you think there's another option?
Yes, I do, absolutely.
Okay.
And that's, I mean, lithium is nice because it is small. So it can go into and out of things pretty quickly. But lithium ions are only about as small as nickel ions. When you take the electrons away, nickel's got much more density to it. So I don't know, there's a lot of explanations that people give as to why things happen in the battery space. But as I said, no one really knows what they're talking about. If you ask someone why something is the case, they'll tend to give you an answer. But the reality is that answer is a bit shaky, usually. As for how sustainable lithium is, I think that's another question entirely. It depends where you're mining it. Absolutely. And I think if you look at some of the South American operations, I think they get some bad press for not being very sustainable. But if you talk about Australia's mineral operations, I think we're not that bad at it. I don't know that for sure. If you look at,
have a lot of lithium in Australia, because my understanding was that 80% was in China.
Well, first of all, it's sort of like the oil problem. When you drill and you explore, you find more. No one's been looking. So
I think they've been looking a bit now, but you know.
They've been looking a bit now, yeah. But I mean, there's many decades left of exploration to do. And yeah, I mean, if you listen, if Elon Musk said this yesterday at the battery day again, he said there's enough lithium in the state of Arizona to decarbonize the whole US fleet of vehicles. And so, sure, maybe the current estimates are that China has most of it. I'm not actually sure about that. I do need to check. I don't. I think Australia has quite a large proportion of the global production, actually. I think Australia is one of the leading suppliers of lithium. But yeah, these things, I think, as new technologies become available, indeed as Tesla's technology, which is a brine technology, a bit different, uses clays, you suddenly get access to reserves you never thought you had. So the geopolitics shifts. Yeah, if you're talking about rare earth metals, I think China does have a bit of a monopoly on those. Use neodymium and stuff like that. But for lithium, I don't think we've got such a problem.
That's all for me.
Yeah, no worries.
Anyone have questions for Jacob?
Yeah, hi, Jacob. I'm sorry I wasn't able to catch the actual presentation, so apologise if you covered this in your presentation, but you kind of alluded it in your previous answer. I was wondering, I've heard things that there isn't enough lithium sort of to go around basically for the world, to give everyone a car, a laptop, a phone, with a lithium battery in. And so are there, you know, what is the next promising thing? Or is that the case, I guess, from your understanding? And if so, what's the next sort of promising technology that will allow us to, you know, everyone on the planet to have a phone, laptop, car?
Yeah, so I think I'll loop this in again. I said before that I'm fairly direct in my criticisms of the oil and gas industry. I think when you see an anti-battery article, 80% of them have had their source in incumbent industries who don't like batteries. And you've just got to be a little careful of what you listen to and read. And this is true of any new industry, right? Solar panels apparently were super toxic since forever when they were first out. And now everyone's realized, oh, it's not that bad. Every new technology gets spat on by all the existing people because no one wants them to take up that technology. There are definitely legitimate concerns. Like cobalt is 50% sourced in the Congo. Like that's not good. Fortunately, Tesla's going cobalt free now, so we're not going to have that issue. But there are legitimate concerns, but the level of press you see versus the size of concern is often distorted when you're talking about new technologies. For the lithium, yeah, I mean, we've got loads of it. I don't think we'll run out. I think there's quite a good amount of analysis out there to say that actually we've got loads. We're not going to have any problem situation. The difference with the lithium and oil, obviously, I mean, people always say peak oil, we're running out. Well, you actually consume oil, you burn it. Lithium, you don't. You just shuffle it back and forth between electrodes. So it's a fundamentally different thing. You can sort of say, yes, there might be enough lithium for everyone forever. Yeah, certainly if the population finishes tapping out around 11 billion or whatever it's supposed to, I think.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. And I guess a follow-on would be for recycling lithium batteries. I know that's a problem. So is there any work being done that you're aware of that's, you know, into getting better recycling processes for lithium batteries? Yeah.
You basically take a battery and you shred it up and you put it in a giant furnace. So lead acid batteries are I think they're one of the world's most recycled things because they have good collection networks. They have centralized mechanics, right? They pick up all the batteries and they tend to take them to the battery recycling centers. The reason lithium ion batteries aren't recycled at a very high level yet is because, I mean, where are your last 4 phones? They're probably in your drawer. In fact, that tends to be the case with most of the world. Everyone just keeps their old phone in their drawer. No one actually throws their phone away. So there's just this huge buildup of lithium in people's, clothing drawers. We're going to get to the point where with cars, this is going to be different. You've got large centralized batteries. Each one of these things is a ton, at least at this stage. And there's going to be a lot of value in that piece. So the bigger the battery, the more likely it is to be recycled. So when you're talking about cars, these things are going to be, it's going to happen. The thing is, none of them have died yet, really. Like some have died in the old devices, but you don't really have the volumes to justify recycling just yet. Tesla is absolutely looking at recycling. They've got those plans in progress. They're going to do it. They just don't have enough recycled batteries yet. There's not enough dead batteries. Yeah, Tesla want to get rid of mining altogether, actually, which is pretty interesting. That's their long-term thing. They don't want to mine. They would prefer just to take the old batteries and make them into new ones. So yeah, people are looking at recycling, definitely. In fact, in Europe, I think there's a mandated requirement for automakers to take their batteries back. So yeah, I think all of this stuff it's definitely happening. It's just not enough dead batteries yet.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. Thanks.
Cool. Time for one more question.
Hey, Jacob. Yeah. My name is Adam. I can ask a question about, I guess, where you think the prioritization lies. So batteries are really challenging in that you need to improve the density, the cost, the charge speed, the lifespan, the recyclability, the reduction of rare earth materials. Where do you feel that like either yourselves or the industry kind of put more of the focus on in terms of like, we're going to get kind of more gains if we focused on density or getting the cost down because we'll kind of like scale up? What's your feeling on the sort of the balance between priorities?
Sure. As far as what Tesla needs or what the world needs?
Both, if you could.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, Tesla energy density is really important because we're talking about transportation. But also, I mean, the whole point, if you listen to Elon's podcasts and interviews and all that sort of stuff, the whole thing is to get it affordable. And the battery is a huge part of the cost of a car. So I think density and affordability, obviously if there's toxicity, then that's sort of, you're defeating, well, you're trading one bad for another bad. So I think, to be honest, we're working on all of it. And as I said, because batteries aren't really made the right way at the moment, there's opportunity to improve on all of it. But much like you don't have just one type of oil, you won't have just one type of battery. There are different batteries suited to different applications. I mean, oil, you've got kerosene, you've got petrol, you've got diesel, you've got bunker fuel for ships. I mean, it's bad stuff, but they still use it. Batteries are the same sort of thing. So grid storage, you'd be talking much more energy. You don't care about energy density, but you do want something that's super safe, non-toxic, long cycle life. So most grid batteries typically will be a lithium iron phosphate composition, just because they last a long time and they're pretty safe compared to the other types. It's lithium, iron, and phosphate, so it's fertilizer.
Yeah, and hopefully that allows driving down the cost and getting into lower cost.
Yeah, absolutely. With those ones, it's mostly the manufacturing process that's the expensive bit, unfortunately, still. So it just needs to be fixed.
Good luck with the vertical integration.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No worries.
Thanks, Jacob. And then if you have more questions to Jacob, you can ask it later on because we have a Q&A session as well. So you have more chances and you can have more time to think about it. So next up, it's Marija. She is the managing director from a startup for renewable energy, doing the consulting services for renewable energy projects. And we would like to invite her to the stage and she can talk to us more about the services like her firm is doing.
Great.
Over to you, Marija.
Thanks for the intro, Sandy. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
All right, great. I might just share a couple of slides with you. Let's just see if I can bring this up. Are you able to see that okay?
Yep.
Great. Well, listen, thanks so much for having me tonight. I guess I'll be telling you a little bit about what we at Energy Synapse see as the future of energy and why we give a shit. So I love the title of this meetup group. So to give you a little bit of background about myself, I've been in the clean energy sector my whole career now, which is just in a decade. And I really started because, in my teenage years, I started to become very passionate about climate change. And I really saw that as one of the biggest challenges that we had to overcome as a civilization. And I saw huge potential in the energy sector. Of course, energy is one of the big three contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, but there's such a huge opportunity if you make the grid clean, and then if you start electrifying other sectors of the economy, you can solve a really big chunk of the climate crisis just by addressing energy, and that's something that really excited me. So at uni, I studied engineering and finance, and then I spent really most of my career working for large multinationals in the energy sector, which was really fantastic because it took me around the world, and I got to work on billion-dollar clean energy projects. And I kind of got to a stage where I was very proud of what I had achieved so far, but I had a bit of a niggle in my mind because I saw that we were on the cusp of this massive transition in the energy sector, and I just felt that I was capable of doing more than what I could in a large corporate environment. And I felt that, you know, it was my opportunity to strike out on my own and kind of start my own business in the space. As great as large corporates are for the learning opportunities they offer and all the travel and other bits and pieces, you know, they do move quite slowly. They do tend to be averse to change, and they're not the best at picking up the opportunities in the market. So I was actually living and working in the US at the time, and that was 3.5 years ago now. I hopped back, I quit my nice corporate job and hopped back on a plane to Australia to start Energy Synapse. And the reason I chose Australia is that even though we've had a very politically volatile environment in terms of energy and climate over the past decade, really, Australia has actually become the sandpit of the world when it comes to clean energy. So despite all this political drama, we're actually leading the world in terms of the adoption of rooftop solar. Up until very recently, we had the world's biggest lithium-ion battery in South Australia from Tesla. It's just been overtaken by another system overseas, but it was the biggest for a long time. You know, South Australia is only second to Denmark in its penetration of wind and solar. So, you know, we're really in Australia, it's like the test tube for the world, and the world's really watching, you know, how are we solving these issues, and it's informing the decisions they're making. So it's an incredibly exciting time to be in this space and to be in Australia. And I have to say, one of my favorite things about having spent the last decade in clean energy is that, you know, pretty much the majority of people that you will meet in this industry, regardless of where they're fitting in the overall puzzle, they are people who are incredibly passionate about what they do. You know, people in renewables and clean energy, it's not just a job that they clock on and off at. They take such immense pride in what they do, and they're so committed to what they do. So working in that kind of environment is incredibly rewarding. Okay, so as I mentioned very briefly, we are going through the biggest transformation in the history of the grid right now. So on the left-hand side, I've just picked up some data that's the last 12 months, and it shows how much electricity was generated from each source in the national electricity market. So at the moment, we're at about 65% coal, wind and solar sitting at about 19%, and then gas and hydro 9% and 7% respectively. And then on the right-hand side, I have a chart that shows what we expect the coal capacity in the national electricity market to do over the next 20 years. Now, this is from AEMO, that's the Australian Energy Market Operator. It's from a document called the Integrated System Plan, and this is their most aggressive scenario, which is the step change scenario. And even though it's the most aggressive, we actually think that this is probably the most likely case. And it could certainly has potential to go faster than this. But, you know, we're looking at going from coal being the dominant source of electricity generation in the national electricity market to this energy source pretty much disappearing by the mid-2030s. So the scale of this transformation is absolutely extraordinary. And I'd like to, you've probably seen this picture several times before. It's one of my absolute favorites. It shows a street in New York in 1900, and it's all horses and buggies and you can spot the one car there that's circled in red, and the same spot 13 years later, and it's all cars. And it's really interesting, you know, this transition happened over a 13-year timescale, which is kind of exactly what we're looking at with the energy transition as well. But the other thing that really stands out for me in this, you know, I remember when I was at school, and one of the kind of key sticking points about fossil fuels that people had a lot of issues with was that they were non-renewable. And by what I mean by that is that fossil fuels are finite. So people had this fear that, you know, because they're finite, you know, once we've dug them up all out of the ground, that would, you know, that's an issue, because once they're dug up and used, that's it. But that's really not, and that's never really been the driver of disruption in any industry. You know, we didn't stop using horses and buggies because we ran out of horses or had a fear that we would run out of horses. You know, that change happened because something fundamentally better came along, which was the car. And that's exactly the sort of change that we're seeing in the energy industry. Now, on this previous chart, I've showed coal exiting the market. And in Australia, the coal fleet is very old, and it's coming to the end of its natural life. And that won't be replaced by new coal. And that isn't because we're going to run out of coal. It's because we've actually found a better way to build the energy system. We've found a way to do it cleaner. We've found a way to do it much smarter. I mean, things like battery storage are so exciting to me, because when you think about how quickly batteries can respond and the accuracy and the precision of that response compared to something like a coal-fired power station, I mean, the difference is like going from the analog age into the digital world. This is a fundamentally better way to run the system. And if we do it right, we can actually also do it for much cheaper than just replacing like for like coal-fired power stations. I mean, that's the opportunity that is ahead of us. Now, one of the big challenges as well with all of this is that running an energy system on variable renewables is much more challenging, and this is often used as a point to try to persuade people that perhaps we shouldn't go down a renewable path, because it is more challenging when you've got variable renewables. They're you know, weather dependent, you can't control them. How do you keep the system stable? There's a lot more moving parts now suddenly in the equation. You're making it more complex. But just like in our horse and buggy example, if you lift the hood of a car, there's a lot more going on there than a horse and buggy type arrangement. But that doesn't mean that the car wasn't a fundamentally better option for transportation at the time. And that's exactly the kind of mindset I think that we need to get around when we're talking about clean energy. So where do we fit into all of this? Well, at Energy Synapse, we're all about the wholesale electricity market. Now, most people take for granted that, you know, when they come home, they flick their light on and there's the power. They don't really think twice about it. But all the steps that had to be taken for that power to actually be transferred from a power station to your home, and the markets that underpin how that all operates. I mean, this is so complex. It's the electricity grid and the markets around it together are probably the most complex machine that humanity has ever built. And the problem with having so much complexity is that it very quickly becomes overwhelming. And this is one of the biggest challenges that we actually see in this energy transition. There's no shortage of data. It's not a data problem. There's millions of data points being created every day. But that complexity can be a real challenge, because when you don't understand something, there's two potential outcomes. It'll either slow decision making because you don't understand it, or it will lead to poor decision outcomes. So we, you know, our goal is to really, you know, how do we simplify the energy market as much as we can? And when I say simplify, I don't mean dumb down. It's about taking all of that complexity and all those millions of data points. How do we distill that into the key information that developers and investors and governments and businesses need to then be able to act on this information in a timely fashion and really drive that energy transition? So, I mean, that's the problem that we're really solving as a business. And in our 3.5 years that we've been around, We've operated predominantly as a consultancy. We've also, over the past 2 years, produced several off-the-shelf research products. And now we're in our third level inception, where we're bottling a lot of this magic that we've become known for in the past 3 years. We're bottling it into a software product. We're developing an analytics platform that's interactive and will allow these key players in the industry to have all that key information and insights at their fingertips to enable them to make swift and profitable decisions in the market that will drive the clean energy transition. Now with this, just to also mention, I've just lost my train of thought there, so I apologise. But no, so my key issue there that I wanted to raise in terms of the complexity, and I guess us as a business, you know, we've had a bit of an unconventional journey, because many startups will jump straight to this product phase, right? Whereas we've been a bootstrap business, so we've started off in services, and we've spent the last 3 years, you know, building our brand, building the reputation, building our networks in the industry. We already know the market very well. We've already tested these concepts as various types of service arrangements. And now that we're building a product, we've got all those years of experience behind us that's really guiding our decision making going forward. So we're not, you know, a startup that's just fallen on the face of the earth and they have this kind of product idea. You know, we've put in the legwork to actually build a profitable business, and now we're ready. We're at that stage where we're ready to put the foot down on the accelerator and really scale across Australia and beyond. So as part of that journey, we do have some opportunities in the tech space that I want to briefly touch on. So we are currently recruiting for a full stack developer who will be helping us roll out this new analytics platform. Now, of course, being a very data-driven application, one of the key skills that we're looking for is that very high and proficient understanding of various database technologies. And then I've got the tech stack there if you're interested. But I mean, apart from the technical skills, what I always look for as well is people who are genuinely passionate about what they do. Because I mean, I love working with people who share that passion, and it's so rewarding to work in the clean energy sector. So anyone with that interest, I would certainly encourage you to apply. And also, of course, we're very interested in people who have experience in startups or have interest in startups. And you know, as I've said in my little intro spiel, you know, I felt, even though I had done so much in my corporate career, after 1 year, you know, starting Energy Synapse, I felt I had learnt more in that 1 year than my entire career combined. And then when I got to the end of year 2, I actually realized, I had no idea what I was doing in year 1. I now know, you know, 10 times more than I did then. So it's just, for me, it's been this exponential learning opportunity. And I think for anyone who wants to really challenge themselves professionally and mentally, working in startups is such a rewarding career choice. So if that sounds like it's up your alley, we'd certainly love to hear from you. So listen, that's it from me. Happy to take questions from anyone.
All right, does anyone have any questions to Marija? I met Marija from, I think it's a networking event from Energy Synapse a while ago, and I'm really interested about her business, the Energy Synapse. And yeah, it's a great opportunity. We'll be working with Marija and her team as well. I'm sure like the crew here, some of them are really passionate about clean energy and clean tech. So yeah, that's your opportunity to talk to Marija. So
if you've got any questions, feel free.
Yeah.
Hi, can I ask a question, please?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, so my name is Amit. Thank you for the talk. It was quite inspiring. So you mentioned the availability of data points, and I'm actually keen to ask about that, because a while back I had this conversation with someone from academia, where we tried to look at potentially optimizing solar, well, to balance out solar peaks, I guess, in the overall grid. And then the way I was suggested that I would pursue that is to do some image processing of cloud cover to just sort of project when solar production on rooftop, private rooftop solar production would sort of ebb. And then I tried to pitch to the professor. I told him, this looks a bit like an overreach to me. Can we maybe use just the data from all the rooftop installations to sort of build a map? And so when we see an ebb in an area, we could sort of project that and sort of detect where the ebb is flowing to. And here's where I cut to the chase. He said, to get people, private people with rooftop installations to expose their production data to you, you'd spend months and months of getting their approval. So I'm wondering, the data that you're and sort of you just pushed me off it, and I didn't, I just dropped it. But I'm wondering, is that data actually available, and if it's not, what is the data that's available, particularly in solar?
Sure. So in terms of at the transmission level, and by that I mean kind of large-scale power stations, all of that data exists at a 4-second level from AEMO. So you can actually get it at a 4-second resolution. But in terms of distributed energy and rooftop solar, that can be quite challenging, and you're absolutely right in some of those reasons, and that's going to be really a whole can of worms, that whole data privacy issue and how we navigate that. But there are organisations that have made quite a fair bit of headway on that. So there's APVI, the Australian PV Institute, that's being developed by the University of New South Wales, and their kind of forecasts and their estimates of rooftop solar, that's based on actual system as well as it's a combination of actual system and estimates, I believe. And then AEMO, the Australian Energy Market Operator, they also have their own estimates of distributed PV. So if you're looking for that data, I would start with AEMO and APVI, because they already have a fair bit of it. But there's a lot more room for improvement in how we actually forecast distributed energy resources, and I think that's going to be a hugely important area as rooftop solar continues to grow.
Right. Thanks.
Thanks. And Joe has put up a few links to the chat channel. So if you want to get more information, you can go to AEMO, as Marija mentioned before. And there's a startup called Solar Analytics. I think they do have this information available. But might be
have to pay for it. But if you're working for an academic institution, I think they provide data grants.
Yeah, I guess the background that I get, that was quite a fair, a lot of water have passed through the Murray since then, but I was just I was curious about what's the line of thought around balancing out, like you said, the distributed production, if we do not have access, if indeed we do not have access to sort of private production data, because I thought that was key. Yeah, but I'll definitely check out the links. It's
do check it out, because that data does exist, but it's certainly not perfect. So there's definitely, as I said, there's rooms to refine that data and room to figure out really what's the best way legally to collect this data while still adhering to any privacy concerns.
Mm-hmm.
Marija, isn't that I think I've heard something from AEMO saying that that's a priority of theirs, so that they can figure out in case there's too much production available and it might overwhelm the grid, particularly in South Australia.
And that issue is going to come up very soon in South Australia. As soon as a couple of years' time, we'll be looking at situations where there's so much rooftop solar that in the middle of the day it's actually more than the demand, and sometimes what people who aren't necessarily from the energy sector, what they don't realize is that in the electricity system, your demand and supply need to be in exact balance at every point in time. And if that balance is, if one of those is too high or too low, it can destabilize the whole system. So, I mean, what they're looking at as an alternative to that is to actually, the kind of first thinking, which is a little bit disappointing in my view, is to just, as a default, start curtailing rooftop solar. Whereas, in my view, I think we need to be a lot more aggressive about thinking about things like demand response and how do we utilize, things like hot water. That's just the lowest hanging fruit, I think, in terms of soaking up excess solar, but also, how do we leverage batteries that are coming in and electric vehicles in the future as well.
Definitely. Marija, I have a question about your tech stack. I'm curious about, with the role you're hiring for, you said you want them to know PHP and Java. Could you talk a bit about the system that you have right now? It sounds like with that technology choice, you've already got a system that is built with that. Could you elaborate more?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of the actual platform, the backend would be mostly Java. The PHP comes more from the fact that our website is in PHP, the backend, and it would be nice to, when we bring on this full stack developer role, if they could kind of take over the website stuff as well. But yeah, I'd say out of the two, the Java's the more critical one.
Okay, and you've already got the system partially built, or it would be a greenfield project?
It is partially built. I can't kind of, because we're being recorded right now,
sure.
into the full detail, but if you want to chat about that offline, happy to do that.
Cool. Yeah, I'll have a think about people I know.
Yeah,
I think there was someone on the call earlier who is a Java developer as well. Could be an opportunity. Does anyone else have questions?
Yeah, I've got one. Hey, Marija. That was a really interesting presentation. I was really surprised to see that 65% of the energy comes from coal, and I wondered what the reasons are that it's so high even now. And is it a political thing? Is it sort of a lobbying kind of issue? And if that's the case, what's changing politically or financially that's pushing this dramatic downward trend that is forecasted?
Yeah, so in terms of where we are now, there was, is still a federal policy called the renewable energy target, and that was legislated, almost kind of 20 years ago now, and then was to get to 20% renewables by 2020. So we've achieved that goal. So kind of that's why we're on this trajectory. We achieved the goal that was set, and I think that's why it's important to actually set goals. Because if you don't have a goal, then you won't get there. But then in terms of that downward trajectory that you saw, as I said, the kind of key issue is that a lot of these coal-fired power stations, they're coming to the end of their life naturally. That they might be 40, 50 years old, and they're going to be ready to be retired. But the other issue that will accelerate those closures is that coal will really struggle to compete in the energy market going forward. And that's because as we get more wind and solar in the market, wind and solar, without kind of getting too into the economics of it, because they don't have a fuel cost, unlike, for example, gas and coal, which you have to burn a fuel which costs money to then generate electricity. Wind and solar is free, so it has a marginal cost of zero. They're very, very good at pushing down the price of electricity. And that basically eats into the lunch of coal. And something like a coal-fired power station, it's built to run base load. It needs to have a very high capacity factor to actually be profitable. But if there's all this wind and solar now that's pushing prices very low under the marginal cost of coal, that's going to put a hell of a lot of competitive pressure on them. And we're very likely, I think, to see coal-fired power stations closing earlier than their retirement dates.
Yeah, awesome. That sounds really good. Thanks.
Any other questions?
All right. I do have some questions to Marija, but I'll leave it to later on. Okay. So we will get Gemma. to speak about her career journey and the projects she has been doing. And in the meantime, you can always like think about the questions you will have for Jacob and Marija, and we can ask them later on as well. The floor is yours, Gemma. Do you need help to share screen or?
Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so thank you for inviting me to the event tonight. My name is Gemma Harrison, and I'm a sustainability engineer in projects and business development for ENGV. So I'm going to talk a bit about ENGV and some of our projects, and then at the end I'll talk about how I got into my role. There you go. So ENGV is a sustainable gas technology integrator. So we partner with global leading technology providers for Class 2 gas solutions. The company was founded in 2013 and had a focus on compressed natural gas and LPG and mainly transport applications, but has really grown with the shift towards renewable and sustainable energy. And we're now an Australian leader in sustainable gases, particularly renewable hydrogen. And we also have some developments underway in biomethane. It's also known as renewable natural gas, which is produced from landfill wastewater treatment and agricultural anaerobic digestion biogas. So our services generally include gas production, compression, storage, and movement. So we design, build, and operate technology solutions, but we don't own infrastructure, as we would find we're competing with our customers who are large energy infrastructure owners. And we do have a team of engineers, technicians, and project managers with lots of field experience in delivering and operating high pressure gas sites. So we're quite a small business. We've got about 15 employees, but we are growing fast, and we're doing quite big things. Yeah. So our capabilities in Australia are quite unique in that we provide a complete solution along the value chain. So an example of this is in hydrogen, where we have partnerships for the core electrolysis technology. But we also provide equipment for storage. So Hexagon do high pressure carbon fiber gas storage modules. PDC machines are from the USA, and they specialize in hydrogen compression and vehicle refueling technology. PowerCell from Sweden are manufacturers of fuel cells, hydrogen fuel cells, and EKC and CPI do fixed steel storage. So many people actually think that electrolysis is a new technology, but Nel have been producing electrolyzers for over 100 years for industry, and currently have about over 2,700 plants operational across the world. Nel are quite unique in that they are the only electrolyzer supplier currently who provide both proton exchange membrane technology, or PEM, and alkaline. And so for those who are not sure how these technologies work, the electrolysis uses electricity and water to produce hydrogen. And the difference between PEM and alkaline is the type of electrolyte that's used in the reaction. The only byproduct of the process is oxygen, which is emitted to atmosphere. And when the hydrogen is combusted or used in a fuel cell, it only produces water. So there's no carbon emissions. So if we use renewable electricity to produce renewable hydrogen, then we can call it green hydrogen. And so I'll talk through some of the projects that we have in Australia at the moment. This is our a Nel C30 electrolyzer that's been installed for ATCO, their arena-funded clean energy innovation hub in Perth. This was commissioned in July 2019, and ATCO used the hydrogen produced here, was generated using solar, on-site solar. And the hydrogen is used for testing gas pipelines and hydrogen appliances. And their own little hub there in Jandakot. We're also supplying, so this electrolyzer produces about 65 kilograms of hydrogen per day. And that's I mean, to put it in perspective, it's probably enough hydrogen to fuel two fuel cell buses per day. We're also delivering the same size of electrolyzer to AGIG for their Hydrogen Park Gladstone project, where they'll be injecting, blending hydrogen with natural gas and injecting it into the Gladstone network. So it'll be about 10% blend of hydrogen with natural gas to supply their commercial and industrial customers on that network up there. So this is quite an exciting one. We were chosen to deliver the first public hydrogen refueling station for ActuAGL in Canberra. The ACT government purchased 20 high-end Dynexo fuel cell cars, and ActuAGL partnered with us to deliver the electrolyzer and the hydrogen refueling station. It's at their existing CNG refueling station in Fishwick. The station has now been installed, but due to COVID restrictions, and we're actually like a Melbourne-based business, we've not been able to complete the commissioning yet. So this will hopefully be done later this year when the restrictions ease, hopefully soon. So this is the NEL electrolyzer and the power supply. This is the high pressure storage. So it's like a cascade fill at 1,900 and I believe 700 bar. And the compressor in the background there. And this is the dispenser and a dispenser cooler to deliver fast fills to the cars. I've learned quite a lot on this project, particularly around the regulatory environment with hydrogen in Australia, as it's obviously quite a new market here. We realised that we would need a test rig to test the refueling on containers without actually using a car. And there isn't such a test rig available in Australia. There is one in USA and there's obviously some in Europe. So we decided to build one ourselves in partnership with Hexagon, who supply the cylinders that are used in the fuel cell cars. So we'll be able to test the station to SAE protocol, which is the international standard for hydrogen vehicle refueling. And we can also use this rig and provide it to other refueling stations across the country that are going to be installed in future. This is a simple fuel technology. It's from PDC Machines in USA. It's a compact electrolyzer and refueling solution. It was originally designed for forklifts to refuel at 350 bar, and now has a 700 bar option to refuel cars. It includes a 20 kilogram per day stack. It's got the compressor there, storage. It's all very compact. And it can be installed indoors and outdoors. So to put in perspective what this kind of volume of hydrogen means, one forklift will generally use about 1 kilogram per fill, so it could do 20 forklifts in one 24-hour period. And a standard passenger car will use about 5 kilograms for a full tank, so it can refuel four cars per day. We're going to be installing a simple fuel in Sydney later on this year, and so that'll be the first one in Australia, but there are a few operational now in the USA and Japan. So I think the next picture is, yeah, so this is simple fuel installed at the Toyota factory in Japan, and this is a simple fuel installed in Pennsylvania and USA. We are also developing a remote area power supply pilot project for a university in Queensland. So we're integrating a power cell 5 kilowatt fuel cell with a NEL small H6 electrolyzer, which I think produces about a couple kilograms of hydrogen per day. And this will use solar to generate the hydrogen to then store and turn back into electricity. We are working on a larger scale remote area power supply project for a remote community in WA to displace diesel. So I think that that hydrogen and fuel cells do have good potential for remote area power supply to displace any diesel fuel and kind of get off fossil fuels in those areas. So as well as working on hydrogen projects, we're also, we have quite a good capability in biomethane and renewable natural gas. So renewable gas, well, first of all, this biomethane is quite a big passion area of mine, as I think it's quite misunderstood and also quite undervalued, its potential in a clean energy future. So renewable gas as a collective term is gas from renewable sources. So that includes hydrogen, but renewable natural gas, or also known as biomethane, is a high methane pipeline quality gas that's produced by upgrading biogas from wastewater treatment, agricultural sources, and also landfill. So these gas sources are organic sources, which would be producing and emitting methane into atmosphere if not treated. Which is usually done by burning it in engines to produce electricity, or flared to just emit the CO2 to atmosphere rather than the methane. So these are avoided. We are avoiding emissions here by converting the methane into CO2. And so as long as there are people, we're going to be producing waste, whether it's sewage, food waste, and agricultural waste. And in fact, as the global population increases, where many of these waste streams are going to increase. So we do need to, of course, try and minimize the amount of waste that we're producing, but also manage the associated emissions. And so discussions around the large-scale gas projects for dispatchable power generation is a very different conversation, and that's obviously quite controversial given the recent announcements over the kind of last week or so. I do believe that biogas, biomethane and hydrogen will play a large part in the energy mix in the future for stationary kind of distributed sources and uses, and also for transportation and vehicles, mostly heavy vehicles. There's also a huge potential for future domestic and export hydrogen markets in Australia. With the recent, I guess, commitment from the government for the RENA $70 million 10 megawatt scale demonstration project. So I'm quite excited to see what comes from that. But anyway, into the, this is the Wagabox technology. So we partner with Waga Energy from France, who have a really innovative technology that was specifically designed for landfill gas upgrading. But can also be used to upgrade biogas from anaerobic digestion. Landfill gas is generally harder to upgrade due to the higher siloxanes and air content compared to digester gas. And methane content in landfill gas ranges generally from about 35 to 55% methane. And methane in AD gas is around 55 to 80, so it's a lot higher. And then the remainder is CO2 and air. So the Wagabox was designed by ex-Air Liquide engineers, so they're industrial gas experts, and they spent 10 years research and development within both Waga and Air Liquide, and they now have 6 patents worldwide. They have 9 plants operational in France, all on landfill sites, and they're now expanding into the Canadian, USA, and Australian markets. So the design of the Wagabox, I'll go through this wee process diagram here. So the landfill gas comes in, scrubs out the hydrogen sulfide. It's passed through a membrane filtration system that takes out the CO2 and the impurities. The CO2 is emitted to atmosphere, but we are exploring options where we can capture the CO2 and potentially use it in like industrial processes and also for like food and beverage industry. Then the high methane gas and with the nitrogen and oxygen is passed through a cryogenic loop that the cold temperatures strip the nitrogen and oxygen away from the methane, and then we have a pipeline quality gas that comes out. So this is an example of a landfill in France that has a Wagga box operational. So this process is at 700 cubic meters an hour of landfill gas, which is pretty standard sizing for a landfill. But in Australia, we have some really, really big landfills, but these boxes can be scaled up. I think the biggest model that Wagga have now is a 3,000 cubic meter per hour. So it's just, yeah, over triple the size of this one. So the gas from this site is injected into the natural gas network and abates over 4,000 tons of CO2 per year from going into the atmosphere. If a site doesn't have a good connection, we can use mobile pipeline technology, so where we compress the gas into high pressure cylinders, and we can truck the gas to a customer site or to a network injection point. And we wouldn't truck using diesel cars, we would diesel trucks, sorry. We can use the RNG in the vehicles. There's CNG and RNG trucks available, which is quite a nice solution for landfill sites, where we can create a bit of a circular economy from the gas that's being produced by the public's waste, can then be used to fuel the garbage trucks that are going around and collecting the waste. So this is actually, yeah, a bit more about vehicles. Like I said, I think gas has a really huge potential in the heavy transport sector, whether it's hydrogen or biomethane. Scania, Iveco and Isuzu all have CNG and RNG vehicles ready for the Australian market. It's not like hydrogen, where they're still pretty much in R&D phase and are still very expensive. The CNG trucks are used widely in Europe because of the many capital cities banning diesel combustion engines as of about 2025. So that's kind of created the push towards gas and also electric and other low carbon technologies. And we can install refueling, I guess, anywhere with a good connection. So we can start the transition now by getting trucks, diesel trucks onto CNG, traditional natural gas, and then as we get RNG, more RNG into the pipelines and distributed directly to refueling sites, then we'll see some really good emissions reductions there. So yeah, that's my presentation. I'll talk a little bit about my journey and how I got into my role. So I'm from Scotland originally, you probably guessed that, but I moved to Geelong just over 3 years ago, which was straight after graduating university in Edinburgh. I've been fascinated by renewable energy and sustainability since about halfway through high school, when I went on a school trip to Norway with my physics class for a European Schools Renewable Energy Conference. I'm from the northeast of Scotland, very close to Aberdeen, which is the oil and gas capital of Europe. My dad works for an oil and gas company, and the industry is such a large employer in my area. So, and I was really honestly not that aware of the impact that fossil fuels had on carbon emissions, but also the effect of oil spills on the natural habitat. And so this trip to Norway really woke me up. And that motivated me to go to uni and study a Bachelor of Energy and Environmental Engineering. Scotland has a lot of renewables, so offshore and onshore wind, hydro, and a lot more solar panels than you probably think. We also have nuclear as well. There's many days in Scotland where the power demand is met entirely by wind. Bioenergy is quite a large area in the UK as well. We have a renewable heat target. and all households and like hospitality businesses have food waste collection bins that are taken to a central digestion plant and used to produce electricity. So I think that that's just things like this are would be really good in Australia to kind of introduce to try and minimise, I guess, divert organics from landfill and try and capture the wasted energy there. So when I arrived in Australia, I did some reaching out to companies in Geelong and Melbourne for graduate job opportunities. I had very little Australian contacts, so trying to build a network was important. So LinkedIn is quite good for that. I also had a bit of work to do learning about a new and very different energy market, and also the energy policy and just the political environment in general was quite different. So no energy policy at all was quite a surprise. I then met the owner and CEO of ENGV, who also lives in Geelong, and he has a consulting business called Envirotrans. So I started doing some consulting work for Envirotrans, which was focused on investigating the opportunity for a biomethane market in Australia. I then started working for a company called ENGV Australia, developing their renewable gas strategy and doing some business development work. At the same time as that, I did a diploma of project management. That was in 2018. So I'm now a full-time employee of ENGV, and I started studying a Master of Business Management because I'm really keen to develop my skills and knowledge in the commercial and financial sides of project development. My role is very much customer facing, developing proposals and solutions, and a bit of project management as well, which I really enjoy. So it's of course beneficial to have the technical background given the subjects that we're talking about. And yeah, I'm enjoying my job, so I'm looking forward to see what happens in the future. And it is looking a bit brighter, the future of clean energy in Australia. So yeah, thanks for having me tonight, and feel free to ask any questions.
Ooh, I just want to show Gemma. We have got a food recycling bin from our local council recently. Awesome. So they're trying to like chuck away the food waste from each household, because I live in the apartment block. There's a facility in New South Wales. It's called Earth Power. So it's similar to what you mentioned before, but I don't know whether it's not a biomethane project though. So they use AD. To turn this waste into energy. It's quite exciting.
Okay, no, that's cool.
Yeah, great talk, Gemma. Simon says. All right. So, does anyone have questions to Gemma? I do have one. So, in Australia, in terms of the biomethane and biogas projects, some of them they are subject to the environmental protection requirements. For example, in New South Wales, in terms of like the injection and the transportation, there are certain amount of like policies and how much you can put into the soil. How do you work with like clients from different states, and does that mean different states they will have different policies? And what are the differences like between different states?
Yeah, it's a good question. So yeah, there is different, I guess, like the regulatory bodies in each state. We're working mainly with landfills at the moment. They already will hold like an EPA license, and they would have to, they would have gone through the same process to get approval for their generators. So it's really like an amendment of an existing license when you change the use of the gas. So rather than going into a generator, we would take divert the landfill gas into the Wagga box instead. But if you mean more for the actual like the RNG at the end, is that what you mean? For transport? So we run a mobile pipeline for compressed natural gas in Victoria. So that's traditional gas where we'll take it out of the network, compress it into trucks, and then transport it to 10 regional towns in Victoria where an extension of the network just wasn't feasible. And so it's exactly the same approach with RNG, because it's a pipeline quality gas. We are, yeah, it meets the AS 4564, I think that the standard is for general purpose natural gas. There is, I know that, so it'll be the ENA, Bioenergy Australia, and a couple of other like industry bodies are working on a policy for getting the natural gas into the network. There's often issues with but like when you upgrade the gas, different countries have different pipeline standards. So Australia, the standards are quite hard for the volume of oxygen and nitrogen in the RNG. So that, I guess, adds to the cost of the processing. So that's a bit of a challenge at the moment with getting some of these projects up as well. The business case is more difficult if you need to spend more capital to get the gas to the pipeline quality. So yeah, there are groups that are lobbying to alter the pipeline standard to enable a higher kind of nitrogen, sorry, it's oxygen content in the end gas. Yeah, I hope that answers your question a bit.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm fascinated by the project you mentioned for the biogas and hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. And I guess Jacob and Tesla has got a potential threat here because the hydrogen fuel cell vehicles are becoming more popular now, like rather than having the battery to run the cars.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we think for my view is that welcome all players. Yeah, I think that battery electric will definitely is dominating the passenger car market. I mean, there already is like all over the world. There is also obviously like the Toyota and Hyundai have fuel cell cars available. But where the vehicles get larger, there's more issues with battery restrictions, whether it's so it's the range and weight restrictions. So we've looked at this for refuse trucks. There's been a couple of trials using electric refuse trucks, and they've had issues with the weight on their axles. So gas, for example, for renewable natural gas or traditional natural gas, it's good for heavy vehicles up to about 450 horsepower. And then above that, then I think that's where hydrogen will dominate. So in the kind of heavy vehicles like these articulated trucks and the road trains that are going up and down the country, that'll be where hydrogen, I think, is the winner, unless there's crazy developments in battery electric technology. But I think that RNG trucks and buses, like RNG vehicle technology, is a really good solution that's actually like ready now to meet that kind of middle market. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Gemma. Does anyone have questions to Gemma? I met Gemma through an event called Buy Spots, which it happens every month, I think, every Thursday.
Yeah, we do poles and wires.
Oh yeah, poles and wires, yeah.
Second Thursday of the month.
Yeah, so it's a bunch of like people passionate about clean tech, or especially in the energy space, talking about the issues and technologies in energy space. So that's where I met Gemma, and it's a bunch of people, and you get a lot of like knowledge about different technologies about it. And also in the recent technology roadmap, the Dr. Franco mentioned that hydrogen would be one of the targets for Australia to develop. And what are your views on that? Are you getting more projects and more clients in terms of like having hydrogen projects?
Yeah, definitely. We're seeing such a growing interest in hydrogen, particularly for natural gas companies, because there's an acknowledgement that they do need to decarbonize if they're going to stay relevant in the future, because consumers are there's like a lot of appliances are being electrified now, and consumers are a lot more energy conscious. So yeah, there's definitely a shift away from gas in that sense. So hydrogen is a good solution, and it complements natural gas quite well.
Which is a bit of the cost at the moment is quite expensive.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the same. I guess well, hopefully it's the same approach as solar. That if yeah, once the uptake reaches a level where the cost curve will come down. But now do expect the price curves to drop by about 50% over the next kind of 5-6 years. So that's quite positive.
Yeah, it's good to hear. All right, I'll open to the floor. Anyone? Yeah, go for it, Jacob.
Yeah. Can you buy enough electrolyzers? Are there enough out there today, or you have to wait for ages to get one?
So it's a good question. It depends what kind of scale you're looking at. Obviously, I think the capacity of NELV manufacturing plants at the moment is about 200-300 megawatt. But because of they are planning to build a new manufacturing plant and then also expand the capacity of the current site. So there's a lot of I guess they can meet the demand at the moment, and that's just one provider. So there's obviously a lot more out there on the market as well.
Okay, thanks. All right. Shall we open to the floor and open for discussion on everything you have heard tonight? And you can feel free to ask questions to Jacob, Maria, and Gemma. And if you want, we can also get a general discussion as well. I'll hand over to you, Jeremy. You can be the moderator for the coming session.
All right, I'll make sure no one asks any questions that are not going to make Jacob get in trouble or anyone get in trouble. So you have to ask fair questions, no IP, special questions about Tesla's IP, nothing about the details of electrolyzers. But I do have a question related to IP, Jacob. I was curious because a while ago, Tesla open sourced some of their patents for electric vehicles. I'm wondering, I did hear that that's never going to happen for batteries, but I'm wondering about with your role, do you have any interface with the academic world? Will any of the research that is done within Tesla get spread throughout the rest of the community?
Interface.
Sorry, what was that?
Is that personally? Do I have any interface with the academic world?
Yeah, personally, and also Tesla as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, so Jeff Dahn is sort of Tesla's battery guy. He's rare amongst academics in that he knows he doesn't know. He's very rigorous, and he does good stuff. So Tesla interfaces with him quite frequently, quite seriously. He's based in Halifax in Canada. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
So I guess my question was, would anything that Tesla figures out get published later down the track?
Oh, sure. I think there seems to be part of that. I'm trying to figure it out. I mean, yes, batteries are sort of the secret sauce, so no one wants to talk about them too much. But I think after a certain amount of time, the whole point of Tesla, and this has been reiterated to me multiple times, it's not for us to build all the cars. It's to put the fire up BMW and Volkswagen and all those other guys and get them doing it, because we can't. There are not enough Tesla engineers to build the world's cars. And we need to, the whole net zero by 2050 thing, right? Like that needs to happen as soon as possible. So I think a lot of things will be coming open source. A lot of the patents are. I think some of the battery patents will. I don't know when. Or maybe they should be licensed. I'm not sure. I feel like if they did license, we'd probably just sell them and just give them for free, but don't know.
Interesting. Definitely, as you said before in the chat, needs all of the players working on it together.
And that's something else, actually. Could I just make a comment on that? It's absolutely right. It takes time to build batteries. Hydrogen's available today. We can just make it huge quantities. And it actually matters because there's a time value to carbon in the atmosphere too. A carbon emitted today will be, it's going to be here for the next however long before we manage to sequester it somehow. So the faster the better, and hydrogen can move very quickly. I think people keep forgetting that. batteries are coming, but yeah.
Yeah, good point. All right, I have lots of questions for our panelists, but I'd like to open it up to the floor. Does anyone have a question for Gemma and Marija?
Hey, I've got a question for Gemma. Really exciting presentation, because it seems like you have access to loads of different technologies in your job. That's really cool. I do a lot of work in Africa, where the cost of installation is the biggest barrier to most energy projects. And I was just wondering what you think of these like novel technologies, which seems the most promising in terms of low barrier to entry for cost.
No, it's a good question. So hydrogen at the moment is not economically feasible. The business case doesn't stack up on its own really, and that's why there's ARENA are putting quite a lot of money in to try and get some projects up. But whereas the Wagabox technology, that is actually the business, it doesn't need funding. We have the business case stacks up on its own. Depending on where the gas is going, this is the thing. So if we're displacing traditional natural gas, let's say it's like $10 to $13 a gigajoule, then it's tricky. But if the offtake customer is a car or a truck, where we're displacing diesel, then obviously it helps the business case. So I definitely think like a speed to market, I guess, is more leaning towards the RNG technology, but definitely hydrogen will get there pretty soon. Yeah.
Cool, thanks.
I was always told that the best form of technology in terms of like energy is energy efficiency, because that's the low-hanging fruit, as Marija mentioned before. And I'm curious about the demand response side of like in energy space, and how Australia, the market, can like have a play. Marija, would you like to chip in some like your thoughts? Because at the moment it's on.
With demand response, I think it's important to remember that large industrials have actually been providing demand response, since the existence of the NEM. So I mean, so that's already very much happening. I guess where the new and exciting areas of demand response are more in the mid-sized industrials, and then going down to commercials and households, because those sectors haven't traditionally participated in demand response. And if we can unlock that sector, it opens up a whole world of opportunities. Now there are some rule changes coming in to effect as of next year with the creation of the wholesale demand response mechanism. Now, unfortunately, that is going to be to start. It will be limited to large energy users, but there's work being done on the, I'm not sure if people are aware, but there's a whole body of work that the AMC and the Energy Security Board are doing on the post-2025 market design for the NEM, and a more robust demand response market is very much a part of that discussion. And we're actually at Energy Synapse, we're currently advising the AMC on what that might look like. But there's certainly huge, I think, huge opportunities. And the really interesting thing I think about demand response is traditionally in our electricity system, demand has done its own thing, and then we've used the supply side of the equation to match demand so that we keep that balance and the grid remains stable. But now we're moving to a system where the supply side of the equation, we're not going to have a whole lot of control over, because that's wind and solar and it depends on the weather. So it's by necessity that we actually need to get much better at harnessing this demand side to keep that system in check.
Marija, I had another question related to the chart you showed about the decline of coal. You were talking about how that's a very aggressive scenario. I'm wondering how that maps to the requirements to keep us to 2 degrees of warming. Is that fast enough?
Well, that's probably a question for a climate scientist, and I'm not sure if that's actually fast enough. But really, in terms of what Australia can do, this is such a conservative talking point, but they often say that kind of what we do doesn't make a difference in the big things. But I think for us, it's more about what Australia can do is actually demonstrate to the world how to transition to a low carbon system and what that blueprint might look like. Like, I think that's actually the role that we play. You know, we can be that blueprint that other economies can follow. So yeah, I wouldn't, you know, whether that's going to be enough for a 2-degree scenario isn't really the question for me. It's more about how quickly can we demonstrate these learnings so that other economies can actually follow in those footsteps.
That'd be fantastic if we could show some leadership.
Can we make comments as we go through? This is okay. Yeah, agreed. But also one thing that I think Australia, what we really need to recognise is how much carbon we export. I mean, it's huge how much coal we send overseas and liquefied natural gas. I think just the Browse project alone, west coast of Australia, Woodside, it was some ludicrous number. It was like it was a few percent of Australia's total emissions, just this one gas field that was turning on, and that was we got dozens of them. And we just send that stuff over to Japan or whoever wants to buy, and yeah, I don't know. I think we're the biggest carbon exporter after Saudi, I think. Like, that's us. And we got 20 million people. Like, it's, yeah. So, yes, but 2 degrees C by net zero by 2050, we need to do that too, absolutely. Let's just stop those exports.
Start exporting solar instead.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Sun cable is pretty cool.
I think that's where we've got to be a little bit careful as well, because you can make gains, for example, in the electricity sector, but if you're not making those economy-wide gains, those gains could be lost if you're still exporting huge amounts of our fossil fuels and other bits and pieces. So I think, you know, with any climate change discussion, it really has to be an economy-wide approach. Electricity certainly is a very powerful sector that can do a lot, and as I said in my talk, especially if we start electrifying other parts of the economy, but you really have to think about the whole economy as one piece.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because it seems like electricity is being decarbonised already, but vehicle emissions have been going up the last couple of years. Hopefully the combination of RNG and hydrogen and electric vehicles will start to reverse that trend.
Could I ask a question maybe to Gemma? Sun cable, Asian renewable hub. Do the economics stack up? Is that going to happen? How soon? Lots to answer. It's okay to say you don't know. It's yeah, not sure. The economics are still unclear unless you do some detailed modelling. Is that the general idea?
On a sun cable? No, I'm not sure.
Okay.
They say themselves that it's a batshit crazy idea.
Do they really?
Yeah. I saw a job post where that's their mission statement.
Really? I see. I've heard from the Asia Renewable Hub, so the similar thing just in the Pilbara of Western Australia. They're completely bullish on it. They think it's going to happen. They keep raising their numbers of gigawatts that they're going to install. It's at 15 now, 15 gigawatts of power. And they're just going to turn it into hydrogen, turn that into ammonia, and start shipping it, apparently, but not until 2028.
It's really cool. 700% renewables.
Right. Yeah. It's just ludicrous. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else on the call has any opinions on that. It's something I'd be interested in learning about.
Another question, if anyone doesn't have any comment on that, I'd like to ask of all the panelists is, what is your take on seasonal storage? It's probably less of an issue in Australia compared to Europe, for example. How are we going to cope in winter when there's less sun?
I mean, I think the deep storage is going to become more important as we get to very high levels of renewables. So I'm talking kind of 90%, and that's when deep storage becomes totally necessary to have, and it's, that kind of seasonal storage. I mean, we're kind of more moderate levels of renewables around the kind of 50% mark. It's not quite needed at that level, but once we get out beyond that, it starts making more sense. So I think there's certainly a role for that, in the more advanced stages of decarbonisation.
And what types of technology would you see being used? Pumped hydro, really big batteries, hydrogen?
Well, I mean, I'd say pumped hydro is the kind of obvious answer for now. I don't see batteries playing that kind of role unless, you know, there was to be an extraordinary, you know, breakthrough in that technology. So I think pumped hydro is probably the most confident. I have to say I'm a little bit bearish on hydrogen. I think hydrogen has a role to play in industrial processes and potentially, as Gemma was saying, those heavy vehicle type applications. But in terms of the actual grid, I feel like hydrogen is a little bit, it's been too slow to get to market, and other technologies are kind of already there. So I think the opportunity may have passed it by.
Ooh, they're fighting words.
Yeah, we'll see. I could be wrong, but that's my lottery pick for you.
Pump hydro, we need the gravity and the infrastructure as well. I recently read an article and saying the payback for pump hydro, it's not really, like, it's not looking really good though, in terms of like finance.
Yeah, it's the projects, right? I mean, you have these different kinds of energy storage. One does chemical, or you can do nuclear, but I don't think anyone's doing that. You've got chemical, then you got thermal, then you got kinetic, probably. You got gravitational. And they're sort of in that order of energy density to how big the project needs to be. Yeah, so for pumped hydro, it's gravitational. You need massive, massive projects, and you get technical and cost challenges, but they're sort of project challenges. With batteries and hydrogen, it's really technological cost. Like, batteries are hard to make. That's why it costs a lot. I mean, lithium iron phosphate, I mean, it's pretty cheap constituents. If you could just literally click your fingers and that turn into a battery, you've got a hugely cheap energy storage device. Problem is, you've got to transform it. Yeah, I think when it comes to grid storage and seasonal storage, I mean, batteries will have to come down a huge amount to make that viable. That said, again, no one knows what they're doing in batteries, so sudden innovations are very possible. Who knows? As for other things, I'm relatively more bullish on hydrogen. I think the electrolyzers that people produce are wildly overcosted right now. They're gold-plated up the wazoo, and they don't need to be like that. They're built for the space age. So they will come down in price hugely. The hydrogen, as a result, will come down in price hugely. Then you need to store it, which is hard. But if you've got the salt caverns, then I don't see that as being a massive challenge. One idea is that we have salt caverns already. There's a huge one under the Gulf of Mexico used to store hydrogen for the oil rigs, the oil refineries. And that stores like 100 gigawatt hours, just that one cavern. And they've got many of these things. So hydrogen storage exists already at massive scale. And if the hydrogen gets cheap, then I don't know. I think people often think about like high pressure tanks and really expensive electrolyzers, and then their models are all out for the costs, but only the future will tell, I suppose.
I think the tricky part with hydrogen at the moment isn't so much like the capital cost, but like the modeling is more OPEX sensitive. So it's about like the amount of electricity that you need to produce the hydrogen, and obviously the cost as well. So unless you can get cheap renewables by like co-locating an electrolyzer at a solar farm or a wind farm to kind of avoid the transmission distribution charges and kind of get below, say, like 5 cents a kilowatt hour, then that does really impact the business case.
Completely true. I would also add the time of use. I mean, the negative power prices do happen. And if your electrolyzer capex comes down enough that you don't care when you're using your electrolyzer and you don't need a high capacity factor, you can have very cheap energy.
Yeah, that's a huge opportunity that a lot of projects are exploring, because PEM technology is instantaneous, so it can start up and ramp down really quickly according to the market signals, so within like 5 seconds. So yeah, that's a real opportunity for electrolysis. Yep.
Solar sponge through a molecular sponge. Maybe that's an overstatement. Don't really know how PEM works, but involves a membrane of some description, I imagine.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
All right, we will have an opportunity for one final question, and then we'll wrap up. Does anyone from the floor have a question for the panel?
I just had one question for Jacob, if you could expand on the salt caves. It's not super relevant, but seeing as no one had a question.
That is something I've looked into, sure. Yeah. Yeah, so essentially you find a big old pile of salt under the ground, halite, sodium chloride. It's pretty gas tight. And people dig caverns in them. They basically drill a hole down, they pump it full of water and pull the water out, and it dissolves all the salt down. You end up with this giant sort of hole, very gas tight hole that doesn't, well, the whole earth is pressing down on it, so it's pretty pressure tight too. You can pump them up to pretty high pressures. There are companies doing it. There are established companies. They use it for compressed gas storage too. Yeah, no, it's a thing. And for hydrogen storage, I think if you can get your compression costs to be somewhat reasonable, then yeah, you can store hydrogen in there, lots of it. Yeah, there's a company called Storengy, STORENGY, Store Energy, but they got rid of the middle bit for some reason. Yeah, yeah. So you can look them up.
Oh,
Awesome.
okay. Well, actually, seeing as there's no more questions, and that was a quick one. I mentioned before about energy in Africa and the developing markets, and I think the discussions focus a lot on like Australia and more developed economies. And I was wondering if you guys had any. I already asked you, Gemma, but if you guys had any insight on like coming cheap technologies that can be used to electrify in a very low cost, but in a very efficient way. And I think at the moment the dominant technology is solar with like a lithium-ion battery. So I was wondering if there's any technologies that you see in development that could potentially disrupt that.
Well, I mean, I'll just say I've never worked in African markets, so I can't really comment on that specific area. But I think just in terms of developing countries and particularly more rural areas, actually that distributed energy model is so interesting to me because they don't have the energy infrastructure in those places, so it doesn't actually, doesn't make sense for them to build a centralized grid like we did with big coal-fired power stations. I mean, probably not. I mean, you could have a much more distributed system. And I mean, that's what's happening in certain areas with the rollouts of solar in particular. So I mean, without, and I'll certainly say up front, I'm not an expert for developing economies, but that seems to, from what I understand, be the front runner.
Yeah, I guess. Speaking as someone who started a company trying to build a low-cost sodium-ion water-based battery, I think that's possible. I mean, I'd be interested in your experience, to be honest, Chris. I mean, you've got some experience putting these things up. I mean, what technology have you found is the most promising and why? Like, what works, what doesn't?
Yeah, so in terms of energy storage, the industry basically follows everybody else because it basically goes on the cheapest cost. So it's lithium ion because of the falling prices in usage in cars and things like that. It's not necessarily the best storage technology for the application, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that lithium ion isn't as good at storing energy longer term, and for things like mini grids you need like 24 hours, 48 hours plus of storage, and it's less efficient than, say, compressed hydrogen to use batteries. But it's just because compressed hydrogen is a lot more expensive and less available that people sort of default to something like lithium ion. So I think there's you've got, in Africa, you've got a lot of sun. So solar is the obvious and cheapest form of energy generation. But how do you cope with the energy demand in the evenings, which is where you have your highest energy demand? And yeah, so people are trying to explore different ways to store that solar and then use it in the evenings. And I think that's where the innovation could come is, well, it's just cheaper and more efficient storage of energy. And I don't know if that can come from batteries, and I don't know, maybe there's other technologies. I'm working on a project at the moment with compressed hydrogen storage. It's like a pilot, but again, I don't know what the, when we talk about energy storage in these projects, we talk about price per kilowatt hour. I think they say that it's about $270 for lithium ions per kilowatt hour, whereas this hydrogen project, when they get it at scale, they want to get to around like 250, let's say. So yeah, for sure, I'm kind of rambling, but I think that, yeah, to summarize, I think the main innovation can come from cheaper energy storage.
Yeah, I mean, and just as a piece of context, a hydrogen tank, I think, is storing energy at about $10 a kilowatt hour. The tank. You've got to buy the fuel cells, you've got to buy the electrolyzer, you've got to buy all these other bits. So the actual per kilowatt hour storage of hydrogen is incredibly cheap. And that's why when you get these longer durations, people tend to go towards hydrogen, because yeah, you've still got the same fuel cell, you only need a kilowatt of power, but now you want 3 months worth of storage. Well, same size fuel cell, but just a bunch of tanks. So yeah, in long duration storage, hydrogen does often make more sense. With the short stuff, yeah, lithium ion tends to be more deployable because you don't have these extra bits you need to buy. The lithium can take the energy, store it, and discharge it by itself. It doesn't need a fuel cell or electrolyzer. So less bits. So, but it also, are you talking mainly for cooking? Is that why people want to store the energy, or is it lighting and all these other things?
Lighting, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's obviously a big variety. But actually, Marija, what you said about, I guess, rural Australian energy is pretty much identical to rural African energy in that the model is distributed. And there it's, I guess, more about like getting allowing people to pay for it in a way that they can afford, or because you can't solarize a town that doesn't really have an economy that uses electricity. It just doesn't work like that. So you have to go in and you know, mentor these businesses and provide appliances and that kind of thing. So it's not as easy, but definitely the model is the same. And yeah, so yeah, no, it's really interesting, and I think there needs to be this continued like innovation in different storage and generation technologies, and it will just continue and get better. But right now, some of the concerns in the industry is that it's like, you know, why hasn't it kicked off yet? It's been 10 years of massive investment into mini grids and solar home systems. I don't know if any of you got experience in that, but there's just been so much investment, and there's very few companies that are profitable, if any. And so yes, whether it's technology or if it's business model, then
I think the batteries they don't advance until factories are getting built. Like, that's my point about academic labs. Like, it doesn't matter if a researcher is researching it; it's not going to do anything really. You've got to wait until the industry is taking it on, and that's only because batteries are unusual and that they're voodoo, and they're voodoo that has to scale, which is hard. If you're talking about a drug, sure, you can do a 5 milligram experiment. You only need to give each person 5 milligrams. You can put a factory together that makes a kilo a year. It's fine. Batteries, you're an academic, you're making 5 grams, and suddenly you need to make 50,000 tons. It's academics, and what's more is the science is too hard to understand, so they don't even know they can't predict how it's going to behave once it's 50,000 tons. So batteries, I'd hold fire on that and just say the advances will come, but it's only now that the factories are getting built.
Okay.
Let's hope this is the turning point. All right, we'll wrap it up now with a job shout out. I think, Marija, do you want to talk very briefly a little bit more about the job? Anything that you didn't mention before?
Well, I mean, if anyone wants more information, it's up on Seek. It's also up on our LinkedIn page. So I guess feel free to check it out there. I'm on LinkedIn as well. So if you want more information, you can find me, and happy to have a one-on-one talk about that. And that's probably the easiest.
Cool. And I think I put it on the meetup page as well.
If you have any friends who might be interested, kind of friends or colleagues, feel free to pass it on to them as well.
Great. How about Jacob? Anything going on at Tesla? Any job vacancies in Australia?
There's a lot of jobs going. They need a lot of engineers, but unfortunately, for the reasons that I described and Gemma's described, you know, like it's hard to get into. It's hard to get your first foot in the door and learning about this stuff. So there's not that many experienced people. Tesla needs experienced people right now, and there are none. So yeah, the job pages are always changing. If you think you're good, have a crack. Honestly, meet Tesla people though, because going through the online portal, I don't think works very well. So you can meet somebody, they'll refer you.
Yeah, I saw a tweet from Elon Musk saying, if you feel like you got rejected by our online portal, please tweet me and I'll look at your application again. Maybe that's the second strategy. And Gemma, anything you'd like to call out from ENGV? Or any other opportunities with Bright Sparks?
Yeah, so on Bright Sparks we do post job opportunities as well. I'm not too sure about the most recent ones and what's going on at the moment. ENGV are kind of actively hiring at the moment, but we are growing with all these hydrogen projects and gas projects coming online. So particularly like gas technicians and engineers, that would be the kind of focus as we grow.
Great. I'll shout one out. GoFire is hiring a senior Node.js developer and also a digital marketing manager. If you know anyone who would fit into those categories, have a chat with me. All right. Any job announcements from the remaining people? Cool. Let's wrap it up. Thanks everyone for coming tonight. Thanks to our speakers for very interesting content. I learned a lot. Some interesting stuff around gas. I didn't realize some of the capabilities around RNG. That's really interesting and great to see the transition, Marija. That graph is very inspiring. And thanks a lot, Jacob. It fills me with hope that we're finally figuring out how to build batteries. And I'm glad that you're working on it. Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks for bringing us on.
Thank you, guys. Good night.